Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sunday edition, not the Saturday edition of Agree or Disagree, the podcast, hockey edition. My name is Kevin Olenek. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at KVOLE. You can subscribe to all podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Find me on Facebook, Kevin Olenek, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. We're going to have an announcement at the end of this about what's going on with this hockey edition of the Agree or Disagree, the podcast. But joining us, carrying firewood, stacking firewood, was that what you were doing?
Yes. Gotta get ready for winter. The preparedness up here goes on throughout the summer, but helping out at the family residence there, getting the firewood all stacked up for winter.
Oh, and speaking of winter, and hello, Tyler. Speaking of winter, Sean, is it really snowing in Calgary?
No, it's actually quite nice here. It did get some snow in the Banff area, though, over the weekend.
Oh, okay. Because I'm, reading Twitter, and people are all it's snowing. We do have a guest with us today. She is a writer and an obsessive Vancouver Canucks fan, an Arsenal FC fan, Middlesex and England cricket nut, the Brit on that hockey thing. She is part of the C4 podcast. Is Anna Forsyth is joining us this week. How are you?
Yeah, I'm wonderful. Thanks, chaps. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. Maybe just quickly, for those who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit how you got involved with the podcast. How are you a Canucks fan? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but basically I came to UBC for a semester in 2011, which is both the best and worst time to become a Canucks fan. So got involved in that hockey fever. I just loved it. And then I went home and I missed Vancouver and I missed hockey. So I'd get up at 3 a.m. and watch this terrible team. And I had a blog and I just made friends on Canucks Twitter, and over the years kind of got close to a few different people. One of whom was Canuck Clay Emo, who came to visit. Well, he came to London and we hung out, and he said, "Oh, you should come be a guest on C4." So I did. I did that a couple times, and I moved back here about 4 years ago. And eventually Clay left and asked me to replace him. So that's how I got onto C4, and the last 2 years, I guess, I've been on there permanently. So it's been a fun ride.
Cool.
Yeah. That's it.
So you feel like you're a full Vancouverite then?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm still a Londoner as well, but yeah, I've been here 4 years, hoping to make it a permanent thing. Loved the Canucks, unfortunately, all through that time. So, yeah, I feel pretty much at home here.
Okay, because I'm just still curious about this.
You went to a cat's birthday over the weekend.
I wondered when this would come up. Turns out
it took 10
away.
seconds.
Yeah.
So, I'm just curious, because it sounds like, is this a Vancouver thing? This cat
I don't
party?
know. It was an Australian that threw it, but it feels very Vancouver to me.
Oh.
Like Vancouver hipster or something to throw a birthday party.
Oh, I have to admit, I've never heard of it, but, I'm not unopen to the idea. I just found it weird that you guys didn't have cake for the actual cat.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know if you can get cat cake. You probably could, but we just gave them. I got them treats, so
That's
I did
fair.
give them a present. So.
Anyway, I had to bring that up.
Yeah, no, obviously.
So it's hard. I know we are a hockey podcast, but the entire nation has focused on Toronto again. Sorry, is that my Vancouver bitterness coming out? But the Toronto Raptors are one win away from winning the NBA championship. Have you all captured Raptors fever? Are you all excited? What is your level of this?
Oh, I'd say it's fun to watch as long as the last 30 seconds don't take a half hour to play.
But it is fun to watch and see how excited Raptors fans and the casual sports fan are getting with it, and we'll see if the Raptors can make it so that the Leafs are the least successful sporting team in Toronto for the past 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely exciting to watch. I'm not sure that this, for me, is going to make me become a huge Raptors fan going forward and watch all their games throughout the regular season, but we've never seen this before. We may not see this again very often. So it's one of those sporting events you want to be a part of. It's historic, and it looks like they really have a good chance at getting this thing completed. What's been interesting, I think, most for me is how the series has been covered. It just seems like there's this refusal on both sides of the border to give Toronto's supporting cast credit. And they have really been getting it done. There's a lot made of Kawhi Leonard and how great he is, but he isn't having to carry the team per se. He's providing good leadership, but the rest of the team is making big shots. And Golden State doesn't seem to have much of an answer for that. They do have the championship pedigree, and that fourth one is the hardest one to get. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow night in Toronto.
Yeah, I got to say, I've watched maybe 5 minutes of the whole of this series. I just don't care about basketball, but it's a really good story, and I have to say I like Sean's point about making the Leafs look like complete losers in comparison.
That's true.
I did see a tweet from somebody about this, and it was comparing the Blue Jays' run back in 2015 and how the rest of the country sort of got behind that in large number. We're seeing that again now. Maybe there isn't this anti-Toronto feeling amongst other Canadians. It's just anti-Leaf fan.
Yeah, I saw that tweet too. I wonder if it's more the Leafs than it is anything else. But I feel like, ingraining myself. I've lived here for 4 years. I feel like I'm ingraining myself in hating Toronto more living here than I did when I lived in Calgary. So, but the one thing that has absolutely been fascinating, like on both, I agree with Tyler. Like on both sides, there's just almost been a complete disrespect of each other. Like the Golden State media hasn't even respected the Toronto media. It's like, well, if we had KD, we have Kevin Durant, the series is over now, and just sort of this, and Toronto's like barely acknowledging any of the players on Golden State. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But I have to.
And Tim, I was going to say, Kevin, Tim McAuliffe went off about this on Sportsnet as well. Like, people want to say, but they're not facing this person or that person on the other side. I mean, the Golden State themselves in years past had the fortune of star players on other teams being out of their way, including Kawhi Leonard on a couple of occasions playing for San Antonio. So that game can be played all the time.
Yeah, that's totally true. I don't think that matters. But to relate this to the Canucks, there's a couple of things that I am kind of curious about. And Clay, speaking of Clay talked a little bit about this. We'll play about this in a second. But the first thing I wanted to ask, because this came up on Twitter and I saw Sean answer this, do the Vancouver Canucks need a brand ambassador?
Well, I think having some sort of celebrity that would be all over supporting and spreading Canucks out there would be great, but it's not necessarily a quote-unquote hockey thing to do. And the Canucks definitely have a few very outspoken celebrity fans, right? Anyways, that they don't necessarily need a brand ambassador, but they've got a few music artists, a couple country guys, Dallas Smith and Chad Brownlee, who was a Vancouver Canucks draft pick, coincidentally. And then they've got Michael Bublé, who I think people know, if they know about him, they know how rabid a Canucks fan he is. And he's actually been on, back when TSN had the radio rights, and Tom Larscheid was in the last few years of his career and would take a few games off. they would get Buble to come on and be color commentator. That's how much he's in on the Canucks.
It was quite entertaining. I remember that, actually. I mean, it's funny to hear a guy on the broadcast referring to the team as we and us, but it was entertaining, and Shorty really had a good time with that as well.
Yeah, I think going off what Sean said, I don't think the problem is we don't have celebrities, is we don't have success, right? Like, I'm sure our brand will get bigger like it did in 2011 with this success, and it wasn't all in a good way. A lot of players, like, people came out of that because in 2011, but our brand was definitely at its biggest.
Yeah, it was almost like in Vancouver you were the heroes, but across the country and across North America, you were almost the Boston Bruins in the sense of the current Bruins is like you were the villain. So it almost created an us versus them in a sense, which created, like, you can create fans that way either because they will either love watch the Canucks or hate watch the Canucks. So, go ahead, Tyler.
I would just say, Kevin, like, I agree with Sean on the point of, it's not really a hockey thing to do to have a brand ambassador, but if the Canucks were to do that and it were to inject more life into the in-arena atmosphere for games, I would be all for that, because I think that is something that has been lacking with the Canucks, even when they are playing pretty exciting hockey.
Yeah, I think hockey is definitely uptight about itself. And sort of we're Canadian, we don't do that. And yeah, it could definitely do with having a little more fun.
Yeah, it almost discourages personalities. I mean, we talked a little bit about that with PK Subban, who is a personality. In some ways, it's discouraged. We almost discourage kind of the out of the box thinking, the way that it's sort of in an innovative way. I just thought of that because, I mean, like, I am not big on what Drake is doing, but he is no question been an impact on what the Raptors brand has been. Like, him and the Supervan have been a huge impact. And I wonder if that would be something that other teams start looking at, because, just bring someone in or have some of these celebrities be a bit more vocal, I guess would create some sort of interest in some ways and create more conversation than there is. But
well, this leads into a question about Philadelphia Flyers mascot Gritty. Like, it's a mascot, but boy, sure got talked lots about this past hockey season.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a great example of a team just kind of letting it all hang out and just kind of really going for it. And it didn't really matter that that's not what mascots usually do, or it was a little, for one of a better word, grittier than what mascots are visual image. But that was what was great about it. And Flyers haven't had like an amazing year or anything, but brand-wise, they sure have. Yeah,
and it was so funny because I think everyone's thought of Gritty was like, this is the ugliest thing we've ever seen. But as the year went on, he became almost the most adorable thing that they used him so fascinating. I don't know. I think that's great. It's a great point about Gritty.
With Gritty too, is like he came out. It was just weird looking mascot guy, and then his first game he bails on the ice too.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So it wasn't exactly the best start, but he just grew on everyone, and just I guess that's kind of what Drake has done with the Raptors fans and everything. But yeah, it's just you need to find something that is different and you can make your own and build on that, and that's what Carolina did with the Storm Surge as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the Blues to a somewhat lesser extent with their team dog. I feel like a few teams got them, but Barkley was the first, and I do kind of remember that one. It's not as big an impact, but no, I just want a puppy. I want a Canucks team puppy.
Yeah. So does Dan Murphy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Candy or something like that. Would be a good name. Well, yeah, that's something that I think to think about, and I think it'll be interesting as the year goes on here. what happens with that. But this was the week of trade rumors all across the NHL. I think the only three people that were in the entire NHL that were not on a trade rumor were Crosby, McDavid, and Carey Price. I think everybody else has been named in some sort of trade rumor, including, again, Milan Lucic, as Darren Dreger has reported that the Milan Lucic for Loui Eriksson talks are on. We've talked about this a little bit before, but first of all, I'm not asking this inclined because I'm questioning Darren Dreger and his sources. I'm asking this because I feel like I'm listening to Clay that there is a perception that this is more media-driven than real-driven.
I don't know if it's that. I actually do think that there's probably some sort of smoke in there that with how Loui Eriksson played this past season, then his comments that he said just before the World Championships, and as well as Edmonton needing to make a move and all that. I think it does make sense for them to be looking at our garbage for your garbage type trade. But the tough part for Canucks and Canucks fans to swallow is Lucic would have a no movement clause that would transfer over to the Canucks after the trade, which means he would be the Canucks would have to protect him in the Seattle expansion draft unless he's willing to waive it, and then he has an extra year on his contract as well. Compared to Loui Eriksson. So the talk is that the Oilers are going to have to add a big sweetener to the deal to make the Canucks take that deal. So it comes down to what the sweetener is for me, whether or not it's a palatable deal.
Yeah, for me, I mean, when this idea was first mentioned, my feeling was it was pretty pie in the sky, and it would be easy to scoff at that now too. But if you take your time and think about this for a minute, it's quite possible. I mean, both players, I think it's pretty clear and in the public that they would like a change. I think Lucic has had enough of what's happening in Edmonton. If the Canucks were getting a very motivated Lucic, the whole coming home thing, and then you got another decent piece in the deal, then I think that there's, that's fine. I mean, otherwise the Canucks are stuck with Loui Eriksson, and he was a healthy scratch last year, and at one point he was on the fourth line. He's not giving you what you'd expect for that kind of salary. Sometimes there's just the whole change of scenery thing is good. And, I mean, I just wonder from the Oilers' point of view, like how Lucic would help them. I think we can see with the Canucks how he would help. He would add, a bigger body up front, and, it's his hometown and all that. You could see how the Canucks would have some interest in making that deal, but it's hard to see it for me from the other end of the transaction.
Like why the Oilers would want Loui Eriksson?
Yeah.
I guess it's just the grass is always greener thing, which I think we're also guilty of here. Like, Loui Eriksson's definitely not doing anything, so Lucic could maybe do something, so we're kind of looking at it that way. I mean, personally, maybe because I'm not from here, I don't give a flying F about homecoming or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that was a ruin for me, like, when he was a Bruins player, so I don't, particularly want him back for that kind of reason. But, yeah, I think it really depends on the sweetener and maybe if there was something there because, as you say, there's the extra year. And, I mean, they do have modified, I think, Lucic is, 8 teams that he can be traded to or can't be traded to, right? I think he can be traded to, right? But that's not for another year.
I'll have to look this up here.
Yeah. Whereas, Loui Eriksson, we can trade him to, 15 teams next year? Or 16 teams? Not 15. So, if you have marginally Loui Eriksson's contract, it's marginally better than Lucic, right?
Well, while you guys looking that up, or go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I would say Ericksson brings more in terms of, I think he's better offensively at this point in both their careers, and he's better defensively, and he's a better skater because Milan Lucic can't really skate. And they keep trying, and Edmonton kept trying to plug him with Connor McDavid, and that just doesn't work.
No.
But I think it's just for Edmonton, it's a trade for making a trade, a change for the sake of change, and then the Canucks, it would be, well, maybe we can get something better out of Lucic, and they can get something extra out of it as well. Jesse Puljujarvi wants out of Edmonton, and maybe that's something that they can pull out of and bring him in and see what they can do with him.
If the deal were to actually happen, it would be such an Edmonton Oilers transaction to make, right? Like, you could just see how Lucic would go to the Canucks and then, like, right off the bat start playing better than how he played in Edmonton, and the fans all furious with that. Like, you could just sort of see how this goes.
I don't know. The Canucks don't have a lot of luck with that either.
No.
So Sean brought up Puljujarvi. Let's talk sweeteners. I have a theory what the Oilers might be thinking with Ericksson, but what about Puljujarvi? I'm a little hesitant myself. I like, especially after listening to Jack talk about from the Oilers YYC podcast, saying he's not sure. There's talent there, but especially when I see what's going, if you're still unsure about a Jake Virtanen, how is bringing a Puljujarvi in this room going to help? That's my initial question there.
Yeah, I think the Oilers would be nuts to give up on him at this point. New management now, so anything's on the table, but I don't know. I don't see that one being realistic. If it's on the table, though, it's worth considering for the Canucks, I think. It's a young talent.
Yeah, he's young. He hasn't really... He's been shuffled up and down and not really been given a decent chance, really, in Edmonton. So I think it's worth a shot if that is indeed something that's available. And because the only reason I put him out there is because he's stated that he would prefer to continue his career on outside of Edmonton. So maybe they just decide to ship him out with this and take care of two problems in roster problems in one trade.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to tell because Oilers is just such a shambles of an organization as to whether his concerns are purely down to mismanagement or not. I would be a little hesitant about him. He seems like a bit of a problem player. And yeah, I'm just wondering if attitude-wise he may be the best person to sign with. But again, it's hard to tell because he's in that sticky Oilers goo all over him.
Is there any defenseman other than Darnell Nurse, which I would assume is untouching, that you would be interested in?
Well, not that would be available. I don't think they would throw in a Clefbaum, and that's really the only other one that they would you would think would be potentially available. But I doubt that he'd be available in that type of trade.
Yeah, I mean, and there's Chris Russell. There's Chris Russell there too, and he's 32. He's got a modified no trade, no movement clause. That one seems difficult to imagine a deal happening there. And then beyond that, yeah, I'm not sure I'd have any interest in any of the Edmonton defense there. I'll throw out another name here. Seeing as Bob Nicholson blamed Toby Reeder for all of Edmonton's problems last year, where would you guys stand on that one?
He's unrestricted, isn't he?
No, he's restricted.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. I don't know. That's not much of a sweetener. Is really what it is. If you're not getting like a Puljujarvi or someone young with a high ceiling out of that, then you would. I'd prefer to get a draft pick or two.
Yeah, it would probably be the best.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Edmonton has picks in all rounds except the 5th round in the draft coming up, so they do have some ability to make deals in that regard.
I don't think this trade gets made until just after July 1st anyways. They'll wait until the next season's signing bonuses are taken care of.
Let me throw another name. This is not an Oiler name, but I'm just going to throw this name out there because he's in this same realm, although maybe a bit of a different situation. Would you be open to an idea of James Neal?
Oh, so now we're going to talk about the three-way trade between all the Western Canadians.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
No,
I think that's too risky a move for the Canucks.
Ericksson for Neal?
Oh, how many years does Neal have left?
Yeah.
That's the problem, right? It's like, as bad as Loui Eriksson's been, like, you don't want to take on more years, which is why the Lucic deal is tough, and you don't want to take on too much more salary because it's just a bad enough deal as it is. So,
yeah, I think that's a big concern. I feel like just shipping Loui Eriksson out would be just to satisfy the people that hate Loui Eriksson. But, like, sure, do I, but it's not worth taking on a worse contract for a player that's has no really anything more solid to offer.
Yeah, James Neal has one more year left, comparative to Loui Eriksson's. So
yeah, so 4 more years compared to 3 more years.
Yeah, so then again, you're dealing with that. He doesn't have the no movement clause, so that would be something. But
slightly lower cap hit as well, $5.75 million as opposed to $6 million.
Mm-hmm. The thing with Ericksson too is that once his signing bonus is paid on July 1st, he's in actual real dollars on the remaining three years of his deal are not that much comparative to his cap hit. So that might open up more trade opportunities for teams on the lower end of the cap and looking just to get cheaper ways to get up to the cap floor.
Yeah, if I'm the Canucks, if I'm trading Ericksson, I would be trading him to an Ottawa or a team that needs to get to the floor. Like those would be my focus teams at this point. Because I mean, you probably can get something pretty interesting out of Ottawa. Not that there's a lot interesting, but there's something you possibly could get that's fairly interesting for them to get to the salary cap floor. So I don't know. That seems to be more of a better negotiation to me. But and I wonder if Ericksson may fit better in the Eastern Conference. I wonder if his style fits more in how the Eastern Conference is played. So
yeah, maybe, and he still has his no trade clause. So
that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about this, and all we can do is talk in hypotheticals because Edmonton and Ottawa would he waive to go to either of those? I mean, I wouldn't. But
well, the theory would be that he's willing to waive to go anywhere. Like he would be dissatisfied with playing with the Canucks and is fine to go anywhere. But we'll see. I mean, when a player has the no trade clause, the player controls the process. So you're absolutely right, Anna. I mean, we're getting into some pretty wild hypotheticals when you've got that as part of the equation.
Right. Yeah, so that will be interesting. What also is, but to go back to defense, there was a number of rumors around here. One of the names that has been talked about is Nikita Zaistev. I did put on Twitter because it seemed like there was a lot of hell no to this. That Boeser was like, I joked, is there an actual player out there that the Vancouver Canucks would actually be interested in? Because it seemed like a pretty negative response to the idea of Nikita Zaistev. Now, this is just my perspective, and you guys can feel free to agree or disagree with me. If your only acquisition on defense this offseason is Nikita Zaistev, then I do not think that you have done enough to improve the defense. But if you have brought Nikita Zaistev in and a couple of other defensemen, I don't think that Nikita Zaistev in a 3-4 role is necessary, or 3-4-5-6, not top 2 pairing role, is necessarily a bad idea.
It's just the term that's left on this deal that is the big issue. Like he's a little more expensive than what you would want, but I think he's better than what he's shown playing in the microscope of Toronto. I'm not sure how much better that be in Vancouver, but the issue is how much is it going to cost to acquire him? Is he going to be traded away as a bit of a cap dump because Toronto's so close to the cap, or is he going to get legit assets in exchange for him? So that's the biggest question, I think, and worry for Canucks fans.
Leverage-wise, I mean, you would think, given that the Leafs have the cap crunch, that the Canucks would have the leverage advantage there.
Yeah, but there's also a couple other teams that were apparently interested in him. And I saw New Jersey and Tampa. So I think there's other teams to take it to play off each other and see if Toronto can get the right a deal where they don't have to give up much in the way of a sweetener to take them off the roster.
Yeah, I did just read an article from the Leafs perspective, from a Leafs blog about it, and they're talking about how they're wanting draft picks, like 2020 draft picks. They don't want any Canucks players, which is fair enough. I wouldn't necessarily either, but I think Tanev has obviously been a name talked about, but yeah, I think we really need to look at the fact, like, yeah, we're using our cap space, but we're really strapping ourselves into this problem again, given the length of his contract.
He does have a modified no movement from 2020 to 2020, or 2019 to 2024.
Yeah, and 4.5 million per, like, that's a decent chunk for a long time.
They just got rid of an overpaid third pairing defenseman in Good Branson, and now they're going to try and bring another one back in. I think it's and who's a more of a defensive style defenseman, anyways. I think it's time to rethink it and figure out if you can go cheaper or younger or just a little more offensive, because one thing that the Canucks have struggled with is getting any sort of production and points from the blue line.
Yeah, I agree. I just think if it was a shorter term, I'd be much more willing to listen and to that deal. But yeah, that's not a deal I'm especially interested in, I have to say.
No, okay. So sorry, Nikita Zaistev, you're not coming to Vancouver, according to
yeah, I've said no, so
yeah. But I mean, they do have to improve their defense. Now, the other name that came up, Jim Benning was on the radio this week, and he talked in glowing terms about the excitement about bringing back Nikita Tyramkin. His agent has said, Tramkin's agent said that he is open to coming back to Vancouver. There seemed to be a lot more excitement about bringing Tyramkin back. But and Benning's argument was, well, if you look at St. Louis's defense and how big that they are, you need to have a big defense. Mm-hmm. What I felt that Benning forgot to say is, if you look at St. Louis's defense and look how big and how well they skate, that is, I think, another big thing as well. But where are you open to bringing Tyramkin back, or is this a guy that, he left and it didn't work out? And what's kind of your thoughts on Tyramkin?
I would be open to bringing him back, but I'd be concerned about whether or not he's willing to put the time and effort into to be a NHL defenseman. I don't think a lot of people realize the difference between the Russian style and the European style game versus the North American style. And it's not the physicality, it's the time and space that you have because of the larger rinks that they play on over there. You don't need to be as quick and have as good, like, first 2-3 step acceleration, because you can recover and there's more angles to play with the bigger ice surface. I'm not sure Tyramkin really has that, but bringing him back would give the Canucks another asset to work with. And they need as many defensemen, especially defensemen, to try and rebuild this blue line, because it is stale, and Quinn Hughes hopefully will change that, but they need more youth on that blue line.
And I would say they need more size. I mean, they have small defensemen. Troy Stetcher, I love the guy, but he's a small defenseman. Quinn Hughes still only 19 at this point. The Bulldog, Alex Biega, a great depth piece on defense, also a smaller D-man. I'm a little of the old school in that regard. I mean, I like size from the D-man. That's one of the few things I liked about Eric Goodbranson being back there, even though he had other struggles. And if Tyramkin's interested in coming back, I mean, that's just a pleasant surprise, because I didn't think that we'd ever hear that.
Yeah, I think I agree with Tyler that size is kind of key on our blue line, given the players we have, and we've kind of been trumpeting Luke Shen as a kind of protector role. So
yeah, that's
something Tyramkin could also do, kind of shelter Hughes a bit. And I do think he does offer something different to the way the rest of our blue line play the game, and I'd be really willing to try it. I mean, he's following the team. He still cares about Vancouver a lot. So I'd definitely be willing for him to come back. I do think that, we're not done. Just by bringing him back, our blue line's still in trouble. I think we still got a ways to go on that.
Yeah, it's not this year. It would be next year, because he still has that 1 year with KHL. But so, but even then, is still, I think, would think that it's going to take 2 to 3 years to really rebuild this defense to what the two, in terms of a level. I'm not saying bring back the 2011's defense, but in terms of the quality of the 2011 and 2010, 2011, 2012 defense, it's going to take some work to bring that back. I mean, I think it's interesting. I wouldn't throw him in a more than 2-year contract, though, or anything like that. That would be my one thing, as I would keep it as short as possible. But
yeah, I don't think you can get him to come back over unless it's at least 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, because he left so quickly, and last time he wasn't willing to go down to the AHL and play. I'm not sure how much of a appetite he'd have to go and put the time in if needed when he comes back. So that's my only worry.
Yeah. And then, of course, we go to the other one that someone put a poll out there on a professional radio broadcaster put a poll out there, and maybe it was misunderstood that would you trade Brock Boeser for Jason Zucker? And that's huh? But the name Jason Zucker has come up again. He was rumored to be going to Calgary at the trade deadline. He was rumored to be going to Pittsburgh if Phil Kessel waived his no move to in that trio. And now he's being linked here. What are you open to the idea of Jason Zucker, and what are you willing to give up that is not named Brock Boeser? Or maybe let's put that on the table. Are you open to, if you get more than Zucker, open to the idea of having Boeser in a trade?
Bringing Zucker in would be fantastic for the right price. Brock Boeser is not the right price.
Not, yeah, no.
They would have to add in something big, I'm not even sure, to make it work. The deal would become too convoluted and big too quickly to make it really be able to break it down very quickly here. But I would say that you could trade down from 10 to 12, as well as adding some pieces like Jake Virtanen or Ben Hutton or Josh Levo or something like that. I think that there is a package there that would be enticing for Minnesota to do it if they can't find anything else. Because I think it was the rumor deal was Zucker plus something for Kessel, and then the Flames one was Frolik and Bennett, or Frolik or Bennett,
right, I think it was
something.
Frolik, yeah. It was so
Zucker does have a lot of value. He'd be a fantastic add to the Pettersson-Boeser line. That alone means you don't trade Boeser. But it'd be good to add a good ad and a good ad that would be smart for betting to get if you can get it at the right price.
As far as I'm concerned, Boeser is untouchable for me. I know that probably sounds a little bit extreme to say that, and take a guy off the table. But I mean, the Canucks have to stick with something for a core and have some sort of plan. Like if you're moving a Brock Boeser, it's like here we go again with Canadian team. They just have to make moves because people are screaming for making moves. Stick with the guy.
I totally agree. I think just even from the fan perspective of recognizing this team, you want to look at that core of Horvat and Hughes, Boeser and Pettersson, and especially because I just mixed up the names. Boeser and Pettersson are like best buddies. Like, that's a really fun thing to see, even from a just purely fan branding perspective. But I think giving up and almost changing direction, or setting yourself back if you're really letting go of someone like Boeser. So I would agree. I think there's a way for it to be done, this deal. Like Virtanen and another piece, maybe, and then either a second round pick or swapping 10 for 12. Like, I'd be happy with that, but whether Jim Benning has the nous to actually get that deal done is a huge other thing.
Anna, where are you on the faith? Where are you on the faith of Jim Benning? Are you do you have faith he can come up with something innovative, or are you concerned?
I would definitely put myself in the concerned camp. I just don't think he's ever been up to the job of GM. He's put some good people around him. I'll give him that, and Joe Brackett included, but he's just never had the proper skill to do contracts and trades, contracts especially. And I think he's been in over his head for a while. I don't know if that's unfair of me to say, but yeah, that was...
I don't think that that's unfair. I think...
I think you'd have a lot of other people who agree with you on that.
Yeah. What about... okay, maybe I'll sweeten the pot for Boeser. Just hear me out, Tyler. Just hear me out. Don't throw things at me yet.
Okay.
Zucker and Dumba.
Yeah, see, that's what I was thinking when I said it would get too big and too convoluted, because Dumba is a right shot top pair defenseman, and that he's worth more than just a right shot scoring winger.
For sure.
So then the Canucks are now adding a lot, and then it gets real big real fast. So, but if they could work something out and they can get a Dumba, then as much as I like Brock Boeser in terms of building center and defense out as a mantra, I think that'd be fantastic. But I just don't think that's on the table anyways, because I think Dumba would be a non-starter for Minnesota.
Although I know that there's a real desire to have him there. I mean, who wouldn't, I guess, but Boeser, who wouldn't, I guess. But he's from Minnesota, and they feel, from what I've been reading, they're regretting not taking him. Well, you probably should have took him, I guess. That's your problem, not the Vancouver Canucks problem, but I guess that's partly it. But I do think, and Zucker also, I think what he would bring is sort of, he's a bit of a pest. He's a bit of that crap disturber. I think he would be a good fit. Even Loui Pettersson, I would argue, would also be a good fit with Horvat too. So you would have a couple of good pieces. I just, I guess my one concern is I don't know if a Virtanen and a Hutton, I don't know the league value for a Jake Virtanen here. I mean, I know that we have the hope that, part of us are hoping that Jake Virtanen works out to what he is, and part of us is hoping that wonders, is concerned if you trade him, is he going to turn out like Cam Neely did back in the day? But I don't know what the league value for Jake Virtanen is overall.
I agree with that. That's an concern for me because to one extent it's like we've invested a lot in Jake Virtanen being more than what he is. But like, I'm fine if another team would be willing to take him as part of a bigger trade deal to get a decent asset. But you kind of get the feeling might be the best value staying where he is and just seeing if he does turn into something. Just because I don't know if he has a great reputation around the league.
Well, I think when you look at how the playoffs went, his size and speed is very tantalizing for any team who's got playoff aspirations, including the Canucks. But if he, and that's where he would hold some value. He's still young-ish, it's his for Jake Virtanen's value is a bit of a mystery. I'm not exactly sure how much he has, but if anyone has a decent amount of trade value out of the players that aren't the untouchables or the core players, he would be the one that I think has the most.
Well, I think Chris Tanev still has a decent trade value. Like, reading a few other blogs from different fan groups like Leafs and whatever, there's still a lot of interest in Tanev. And from our perspective, he's so injury-plagued that it's really hard to see how we can kind of get a chunk of change for him, get decent value from him. But I think right now he still has a decent value, so they're not, like, really putting everything in finding a partner there. Like, I think they're crazy if they don't.
That's the problem with a lot of the Canucks. Well, basically any player on the Canucks that's considered a trade chip is there's either like Virtanen, where you don't know what exactly you're getting, or you've got injury issues with Sutter, Tanev, and Berchi.
Yeah, I think Berchi's a massive shame. I really could see him a year ago turning into a really great player, and it seems like he's going to have some issues down the road.
Yeah, that's it's unfortunate what's happened to Berchi, especially with concussions. You just don't know what's going to happen going forward. But
yeah, and it just seems like he's untradeable because of the injury history. I mean, I've talked about this before with Tanev. I mean, he always seems to be brought up in trade talks, but a deal never gets done, and it makes you wonder, is it because the other teams can't count on him? I mean, if I was another team's general manager, I'd be reluctant to make that trade given the injury history there.
Yeah, he's a lot of the issues, like in terms of like concerns with the Zaistev is his contract and the length of it. With Tanev, it's the injury concern and whether or not you're trading for someone who's just going to spend half the time on the IR. So do you really want to give up much to get him? That's where I think there's still lots of interest in Tanev, but at a bargain basement price.
Yeah, you're not gonna. Like, I would think that would be sort of in the Kawhi. I'm not saying this is Kawhi. Just hear me out. The idea would be more that you would play Tanev more in the playoffs than you would in the regular season. Like, if you had him, you would make sure that he's ready for the playoffs. Like, you would do the load management thing. Yeah,
and I think I've said this before on C4 how, like, closer to the trade deadline, definitely worth pushing for Tanev again, and because I think he has a lot of use for teams as that kind of players in the crunch down the line going into the playoffs.
What Ben Hutton is an interesting case because I like him. I think he's a good fit on the Canuck team, but I don't think Travis Green necessarily agrees with me. What would be the value? What would you get for a Ben Hutton, do you think? What would be a reasonable?
Another player of his ilk, either forward or defense. Younger, hasn't quite broken through, but has played decent sort of bottom of the lineup minutes. or just a mid-round pick of some sort. He is interesting too because they've got Juolevi coming up. They gave Sautner and Brisebois long looks at the end of the season as well. I'm wondering where Hutton fits in Travis Green's depth chart now, because I didn't think Sautner or Brisebois looked out of place playing bottom pair minutes at the end of the season. And then you've also got, like I said, Juolevi coming up. They'll be pushing for minutes probably halfway through the season, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of hard because I do see some value in him, but without Travis Green investing some time and effort into him, like, you worry that his value's just gonna keep dropping.
Well, I don't think it's dropping. I think it's actually at a much higher level than it was last year.
No, I agree with that.
But I just don't see him being here long term because of the Juolevi factor, as well as I think Ashton Sautner needs to go through waivers to go down to Utica next year. So whether or not they want to keep him up versus Hutton, or because Hutton's due for a new contract too. So what that number ends up being is going to be key as well.
Yeah, Sautner he has one more year. Yeah, he's up 1920, $675,000 cap hit. So 25, 6'1", 195. I mean, I think it's fair to say that there's some competition for Hutton going into training camp. And maybe this is a guy that you look at trading mid-season, not necessarily in the off-season, once you know what you're getting from Juolevi.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. Like, I'm not saying Hutton is like this fantastic player, but also there's just so many unknowns behind him. Yeah. I think.
Well, and Juolevi, I mean, you can't make assumptions at this point about what he is, because we're still like, he hasn't even played an NHL game yet, so we're really like just hoping here, right? Like, there's a lot of assumption there. It's okay, he's part of the picture. Well, what if he's not? Like, I sure hope he's part of the picture, but what if he's not, right? That's kind of what's a little bit frightening about all this defense talk.
Yeah, but the other thing, like I said, it's not necessarily just Juolevi. That's the blue sky, perfect season. He comes up and takes top 6 minutes halfway through the season. But it's, like I said, I think Sautner and Brisebois have a lot bigger a say in what the future of Benton Hutton is than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. I think they both played very well in bottom 6 minutes, and I think that will be the role that Ben Hutton would be filling. Because whether they bring back Edler, which is a big question mark now, or they go out and grab another left shot puck moving defenseman in free agency other than Edler, I think you're still looking at Ben Hutton as your third pair left defenseman, and if he's even on the team, because I think he's definitely someone who has who would be a trade chip in the right deal.
Yeah, that's interesting, and the question of the Edler question is more and more interesting, as I think ultimately this is going to get done on July 1st, maybe July 2nd. I really truly don't believe he wants to play anywhere else, but I could see a scenario though, which would be interesting. There's a part of me that wonders if Edler doesn't sign in July, if they wait midway through the season to bring him in.
Well, that's assuming that he doesn't sign elsewhere. I don't think Edler would sit out if he doesn't get signed by the Canucks, and I think he'd end up either retiring or moving on to another West Coast team that is in need of defense.
Is there not a bit of a window prior to July 1st where other teams are allowed to at least engage the players' representation?
Yeah,
okay.
They get 1 week before July 1st to talk with any prospective free agents.
Yeah, so I think that it's quite likely at this stage now that they'll get to that window of opportunity to see what the other offers may be. And, if you're Edler's agent, you bring those back to the Canucks, and that would probably put a little more pressure on to make a deal. I'm with Kevin. I don't see Edler wanting to play anywhere else, but I'm with Sean on the idea that I don't see him sitting out time. And if a deal's not going to get done with the Canucks in early July, then I think he will sign somewhere else.
Yeah, it's hard to tell how far apart they are right now, but there's kind of been radio silence. So, I think it'll get done.
Yeah, it's all coming down to the any sort of no movement clause because Edler probably doesn't want to get exposed in the expansion draft if he signed a 2-3 year deal, and then they don't, and the Canucks don't want to have him force their hand and expose someone who they don't want to expose.
Right.
So that's the biggest tripping point with the Edler deal right now. Is without the expansion draft, I think this deal's done, and he signs a 3-year extension with a full no move clause type deal. But I just with the expansion draft throwing that twist in, I think it's he's not the only one who's feeling that pinch. I think.
Yeah, that will be something to talk about for sure going forward. I do want to move on to one of the guys that I think I'm inclined to be, and probably he's a little bit ahead. I mean, there's a number of ways that you can go with the 10th pick, but Peyton Krebs made some news this week because he tore his Achilles, and it looks like he is not going to be ready for a training camp at this point. He was on a very bad team, and he's it's an Achilles injury. I guess the first question is, two questions I want to ask here is, does the Achilles injury put him anywhere in a concern for you in terms of the 10th pick? And do you have a particular favorite that you're leaning towards realistically being the 10th pick? So I think that the common consensus is it's going to be Hughes, Cackle, probably Byram, and Alex Turcotte, I think, are the top 4 now. I think that's kind of been, so within the realisticness of it, are you hesitant about Peyton Krebs, or is it like no big deal, he's still on your list wherever?
He's still on the list for the 10th pick for me. He was a little bit lower for me just because I'm not sure if he's got the high-end offensive talent that a lot of the other guys that could potentially be available. I'm not sure he has that. This does put a little bit of a worry in it because you don't know how serious it is. You've seen players like Kevin Bozak came back from an Achilles injury and wasn't too bad, but there's other ones who have struggled to come back, and you don't know what the effect on his skating will be. But for me, I think the Canucks will be lucky if Trevor Zegras drops, and that would be a fantastic pickup at 10 for them. But really, I am on the Alex Newhook bandwagon at this point. That he seems like a very much a Canuck draft pick based off of a couple of articles reading about how down to earth he is, and he's got the hunger to always get better, like Pettersson, and then he's also got the Brock Boeser down to earth, taking care of a down on their luck kid story that always warms the hearts of fans. So I think if he's available at 10 and no one else has dropped like a Zegras, I think that's who the Canucks will pick.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that it would completely affect your pick, but Achilles injuries are very tricky and hard to predict. And it just sounded so nasty. It gave me the heebie-jeebies, I have to say, reading about that injury. But I don't think it would stop you drafting him if that's who you had on your list at that spot. But, yeah, he wouldn't be necessarily my pick at 10. Yeah, I would definitely be up for taking. I'm still a bit unsure on Newhook, but he is rising in my regard as he is in most of the rankings. It's just only purely because it's the BCHL that still has a little bit of a worry for me. And the fact that he's dominating that league, so he's not necessarily really been tested, but he does look like a very speedy, smart, like quick hands player. So I'm definitely not opposed to a Newhook, but maybe not.
Is he going to college or is he?
Yeah, he's going to Boston College.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to be playing. Yeah, he's going to be playing with Matt Boldy, who's another potential pick.
Matt Boldy's been high on my list for a while, and I haven't sort of seen anything to make me fall out of love with him, but Newhook's definite riser as well.
Yeah, and with I know you guys on C4 are going to have Cam Robinson on soon, and we just had him on, and he was talking about how the Canucks are, what he thinks is that they're going to be going for speed and skill. And Matt Boldy's, as good as he is, doesn't necessarily play the game at the high pace and have the skating that I think the Canucks are looking for, which is why he's probably lower on their list than I think a lot of people would be hoping.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair concern because I think that's maybe something Canucks in the past haven't really prioritized is skating ability, and maybe something they really need to be pushing for. It's good skating that cannot be underrated at all. So I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
Yeah. Tyler, what are your thoughts?
I'm of the belief when you get to 10th, it's so hard to make predictions because you usually, especially in recent draft years, like we've seen some real eyebrow-raising selections, in that 4, 5, 6 range. So I mean, we're really reaching here on some of this just to figure out kind of what will be available at number 10. And I'm still torn on whether the Canucks should look at getting another defenseman or not. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's like, what do they have in Loui Eriksson? What do they have in some of these other guys? Will they be able to sign Edler? What do they do with Shen? Like, there's so many questions there. I suppose if they don't pick a defenseman, I'd love to see whatever the best center available is be picked.
Yeah, because I think center depth is huge too.
Mm-hmm. You never go wrong with having too much center depth.
Yeah, and just we've got 2 elite centers, and then what do we have after Bo? Like, that's a legit, dependable center. I would just be. I think even at 10, you want to draft best player available, and I kind of worry that Soderstrom's being overvalued just by being the next best D after Byram, and Byram is so good that teams that can't get him will go for Soderstrom. And I don't get me wrong, definitely need to sort out the blue line, but I would still be looking for best player available, and center depth is still a huge issue.
The thing with the defenseman available that will be available around 10 is you were talking about Soderstrom, but Broberg's been getting a lot of press of late, and then there's also there's like 3 others that are all right there, and it just depends on what you're looking for and your preferences on different skills. Depends on who different rankings have higher up. I believe Cam has, at least last time when we talked with him, I'm not sure if it's changed yet, but he was talking about how I think he had Seider as the second best defenseman available. So that's a little bit different than most.
He was lower on Broberg than a lot of other people have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've got 5 defensemen that are in that second tier outside of Byram that could be available. Like, you could go at and pick at 10, but I think the level that of forwards that you could get is a half step or a step above them. So it'd be tough to swallow if they go defense at 10, because I just think there's going to be someone's going to drop, whether it's a Podkolzin or a Zedgrass or maybe even one of the top 2 Western Hockey League guys drops. There's going to be someone who drops, because I think you're going to see someone reach on a forward that we haven't talked about yet, or one of those 5 defensemen. If not, 1 or 2 teams do that. So someone's going to be available at 10 that we don't expect, just like we didn't expect Quinn Hughes to drop to the Canucks last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably one of the most exciting drafts in a long time for that reason.
Well, I mean, we haven't even talked about the fact that there's still some debate here as to whether it's going to be Hughes or Kako that goes first, right? I mean, this first time for me, I think, in quite a while that there really is a question there.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. Although I think it's going to be Hughes ultimately, but I certainly like what I've seen from Kako for sure. But the other thing, excuse me, sorry, I sneezed on the podcast here. The other thing is another way that I'm thinking here is maybe, and I know that we don't have a lot of faith in Benning here, but if Benning or the Canucks can convince someone that there's going to be a guy that is not going to be there, like a Podkolzin or someone that's like our Spencer Knight, which is certainly a wild card. Spencer Knight is becoming a bit of a wild card in that area because you don't want to pick some don't want to pick a goalie that high, but some argue that this is a guy that you don't necessarily want to pass up either. That you could, like, if you could convince someone lower down to move up, and you could still get like a New Hook or a Krebs or someone that you're interested in for hopefully someone wants to reach at 10. That would be fascinating as well. Like, there is value. My point is I can see value in the Canucks moving down and still getting a pretty good player if you can get someone to convince to reach.
Yeah, and now we're back to the wild trade discussion. Coming full circle here, because honestly, if we're not moving that far, I'd be very open to talk there.
Well, yeah, I think if you can, especially if they're wanting to solidify that defense a little bit more. If you trade down 2-3 picks, you're going to be right in the middle of that area where most of those defensemen are going to go. So it wouldn't be surprising if they move down to, say, 12-13, that a Soderstrom or a Seider is available if they want to go there and fill up on a top-end right-shot defenseman.
Or one of those four, like a Zegras or a New Hook.
I don't think Zegras is one of those guys I don't think is going to drop past 9 or 10 at the very latest. But I think if they're looking to trade down, it's more in regards that they're holding one of those defensemen quite high and can see him being available in 2-3 spots lower down.
Yeah, it makes it fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to watch what happens. There's so much going on that it's, I mean, I think we know the top 3 or 4, but there's still, after that, I think that's when this gets so interesting. So,
and we have, and you just know that Francesco Aquilini is hungry to make a splash at this draft thing, being the host of it. So, could be in for a surprise in that first round on June 21st.
Yeah, you just hope that Jim's kind of not got one pick in his head, but just keep hustling all the way down, paying attention and figuring out moves and how we can leverage that pick and knock out space.
Yeah. And the last time the the draft was in Vancouver. That was the Luongo deal. So it's not unheard of for the Canucks to make a big splash when they host the draft. So,
well, Sean, you were mentioning off like in a private chat that you think that this is probably going to be a busier time overall than the trade deadline in terms of trades. Like,
I think so too. Yeah, well, when you look at the setup of how many teams are so close to the projected cap, and that cap might not be as high as we originally thought. I think there's going to be a lot of movement once teams get a little more deeper into the discussions with their key free agents, and they'll make appropriate moves to either clear up cap space so they can sign who they want and keep who they want before July 1, or even before allowing those players to negotiate with other teams in that week leading up to July 1. I just think there's going to be Tampa is going to be looking to make some moves because they need to clear cap space to get Braden Point, and there's lots of rumors that Erik Karlsson wants to go there, so they'll have to make room for him if that's the case. And then you got Toronto with their cap issues. Vegas is over the cap at this point, so they need to make some moves. There's just too much. There's too many teams that are in desperate need of making moves to clear up cap space alone, let alone make hockey trades to shake things up. For it to be a quiet time.
Just a note on Toronto, they don't have a first-round pick at the moment either, so that's something to watch out for. I'm sure they'll be very motivated to try and make a deal and be picking in the first round.
Yep.
In regards to Vegas, they've got some picks to move. No 6th or 7th round pick, but a first-round pick, a second-round pick, 3 picks in the 3rd round, a pick in the 4th, and 3 picks in the 5th round. So I'm sure we'll see Vegas making some moves involving their picks in those later rounds or middle rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be really exciting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One more quick thing, I guess we do have to talk about this as well, because as we're recording this, we're about an hour and 45 minutes away from the St. Louis Blues leaving the air quote sad club potentially as getting their first ever Stanley Cup. Funny enough, we talked about this with the beginning with the Raptors, that some will feel that this championship will have an asterisk on it. They got ahead in Game 5 in part because of a missed call, the Tyler Bozak trip that was missed. All of Vancouver has as much sympathy as they possibly could muster for Boston, in crocodile tears for that. But I guess at the end of the day here, is this going to be a Stanley Cup championship that, quote, air quote, is going to be asterisk? Or going to be...
No, I wouldn't say so. There's tons of blown calls in the playoffs, and you still have to work really freaking hard to get to a Stanley Cup final and to win it even more so. I think the officials are lying in a bed of their own making. They've put their whistles away far too much, and then they make up calls. And I think, sure, it might be a tough discussion about officiating during the playoffs, but I don't think it takes away from St. Louis's win.
Have we forgotten about the first and last pucks that went in the net for the Nashville Predators when they lost to the Penguins were called back goals from offside reviews?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the deciding game of the Preds-Penguins Stanley Cup final, there was a quick whistle that denied Nashville of a goal. I mean, this has been, there's been missed calls going on forever. I mean, Leaf fans would talk about 1993 and the high stick not called against Wayne Gretzky. I mean, blah, blah, blah. There's no asterisks in sports for me unless, somebody's been cheating.
Yeah.
So, for example, Barry Bonds has the home run record in Major League Baseball. Well, I would put the asterisk there because, he was cheating. And it's not like he didn't hit the home runs. It's just, how many of them were influenced by the performance-enhancing drugs. That's where the asterisk comes in. Beyond that, there's no such thing as an asterisk.
Yeah, I think not to get too heavy, but baseball deserves a lot of asterisks for their early record for being a segregated sport. So, unless there's a huge reason not to, I'm not going to put any stock in a couple missed calls here or there.
No, I mean, quick note on the officiating. I mean, we've talked about this on our podcast a number of times. The NHL has botched this by cutting experienced officials earlier in the playoffs over one bad game or one wrong call or whatever. And now look what they've got. And Wes McCauley, unfortunately, with the hamstring injury, that's another really good official that's not out there. And here we are. I mean, you don't, in my opinion, they don't have the best guys out there.
Yeah, and it's just bad calls are going to happen. The game moves so fast, and just so many things are happening. Again, this just goes back to the discussions that I think us and other podcasts and all media have had is how do we fix this? And you gotta take a step back and look outside the box. And if that means taking a ref off the ice and having them sit up above and being in radio contact with the on ice official to either take a body off the ice or have a third official looking eye in the sky type deal. You gotta take a look at that instead of just going to all these different video reviews that just slow down the game.
Well, and not to get too far into, sort of looking at what the NBA is doing again here, but it has been interesting watching how they use the tools available to help the officials. So in the last Raptors-Warriors game, somewhere in the first half, I think near the end of the first quarter, if I remember right, there was a basket that was credited to Golden State that was questionable as to whether the shot was made before the shot clock ran out. Play continued on, and then when they had a chance to review it, they actually did take the points away.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's just like, wow, what a world. Hey, they the game can continue. They use the tools available. They get it right.
Yeah.
And the NHL just gets in its own way. It's just it's quite comical actually the way it's become. But
and I could probably speak to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, and it's just like, why is there such refusal? But maybe these playoffs now have finally been the tipping point for big changes. Like little tweaks are not going to help the NHL officials get calls right. Then there needs to be more than little tweaks to really fix this to fan satisfaction.
Well, and I could probably talk about VAR from a soccer perspective as well. But the only thing I'll say is as much as, okay, I'll concede the Bozak miss, but Brad Marchand labeled like Lowbridge Tarasenko, and that was missed. Marchand early in the first period tripped someone. That was missed. There was a ton of missed calls in that game.
And can I just say, Brad Marchand has made a career of getting away with stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Like, look at what he did with Justin Williams early in the Eastern Conference Final.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot. Like, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the Bruins there, and they had a ton of opportunities to put that game away early, and they didn't. So, I'm sorry. It's on the same level as what happened in New Orleans. Is it a bad call? Yeah. Did it cost them the game? I would argue not. They were able to get a goal back, and they had their opportunities. So,
well, if there's one thing to be learned from what happened in Game 5 of this Stanley Cup Final is that can we put the conspiracy theories to bed finally? Like everybody, there's all this talk about it's always favorable to Boston, and it is interesting how many breaks they get, but they didn't get the break that time. And I would like to point out, people want to make the whole thing about how the Bruins got away. It was Marchand Speedbag and Daniel Sedin in the 2011 Stanley Cup Final. That was Kelly Sutherland, the referee, standing there watching that happen. The same Kelly Sutherland that didn't call the Bozak penalty. So, let's try and get past this whole conspiracy thing. It's that they're not doing a very good job, and the league has not done enough to support them.
Well, incompetence. It's not anything more sinister than that. But I think, you talked about VAR in soccer. I don't think it's anywhere near where it could be, but honestly, something needs to change, and I'm glad that it's being explored. So I think NHL could take a long, hard look at itself too.
Well, part of it is that they just need to find a standard and pick and stick to it.
Right.
It's this type of year where you get the obligatory Jeff Merrick tweet about if you called everything by the rule book, there'd be a penalty on every play, and everyone knows that that's not what we're looking for. We're just looking for one standard where it's the same from game 1 in October through till game 7 of the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
It's you gotta what is a penalty in October should be a penalty in May and June, because otherwise you're, as Elliot Friedman said early in the first round or second round, you need 2 teams to win in this league. You need the team that will get you into the playoffs, and then you need the team that's going to win you the playoffs, because the game inherently changes because the refs don't want to affect the game by blowing the whistle, but by not blowing the whistle, they're affecting the game.
Yeah. And that as a guy who's refereed amateur hockey for 22 years, I mean, that's always been the struggle. Is you got everybody screaming for let him play, and around here, I've probably been known over the years. I think if you ask people, as one who calls a lot of penalties compared to other guys, and it drives people nuts. You get the booing, you get the BS chants, you're really under fire out there. But the players do adjust. It does, might take 2 or 3 years for them to get the message, but they do adjust. If the NHL had the stones to say we're going to call it the same way in the playoffs as we do in the regular season, the players would figure it out. This idea that they won't change is just silly to me.
Yeah, I think, if you just, as you say, have the stones and make the move, then they'll have to adjust and it'll become the new normal before long. Okay. I'm a netball umpire myself, and I'm pretty hard-ass, and I'm just like, whatever I say goes, so I think we'll take some lessons from both, clearly.
Well, and then if we're going to look at talk about officiating, if we go back to last weekend with the Champions League final, and they had in Champions League, they have the standard that if your arm is up and the ball hits it, and you're in the box, that's a penalty. Yeah,
and I would say the handball laws are a bit of a mess, but I don't think you can argue with a call like that, in my opinion. But I'm also biased because I hate Spurs with all my being.
I wasn't privy to that information, so when that whole thing happened, I was going, don't they have video review? Can't they look at this and say, oh, look, it just hit his upper arm, that's not a handball? But then when the rule was communicated to me, I'm like, oh, okay, then that's the right call. And if you can get more black and white, I know it's tough with a lot of these rules, but if you can get more black and white rules, or at least more set guidelines and standards to what is a penalty and what isn't a penalty, that helps. Or what is a goal and what isn't a goal. Because that's the other issue with this whole video review, is that we don't know what goaltender interference is. We don't know what a kicking motion is. We don't know what what offside is half the time too, right? So
yeah, and then when the referee gets on the microphone, they all they tell you is it was determined yes or no. There is no explanation as to why.
Yeah. I think the NHL, amongst anything else, the NHL needs to improve the communication of why things are happening the way that they are. I can understand a bad call because they happen, but if you I just want to know what you're thinking. What were you thinking there? Why did you not call the Tyler Bozak? Why was that not a penalty? What did you see there?
Yeah. I mean, we can speculate. I mean, I have my ideas there. I mean, in that particular play, I mean, Bozak didn't really adjust course to try and make contact. He didn't throw his leg out there per se, so it didn't jump out as particularly obvious. But at the end of the day, it was a trip that wasn't called.
Yeah, and I think Bozak probably would have argued the call because his hands were up.
He was already arguing it.
Yeah, he was already going, oh, no, I didn't trip him, even though he did. Yeah. The communication side of things is interesting because it's not going to happen, but what would be really nice is some sort of document that you can go through, and the refs can explain themselves in terms of the controversial calls. Like, it doesn't have to be after every game. It could be like every week you pick out 2-3 controversial calls, have the ref and maybe an overseeing official go through the thought process of the call, and you move on, because then you're educating your fan base on what a penalty is.
Yeah, you're not in the playoffs. That could be done through the series supervisor too. Like, you don't have to necessarily put the referee themselves out in front of the media, but they can do their debrief. Then you can have the supervisor come out and actually offer an explanation of substance, other than what the really weak answer that we got from Stephen Walkham about the Bozak thing, which was the referee viewed it and didn't view it as a penalty. Like, that's just weak.
Like, obviously not.
Yeah.
Like, we could have figured that out ourselves, man.
The thing is you look at the past of how the NHL has done suspension videos and videos about controversial, like, borderline calls that were not suspensions. Just take that template and move it to reffing. You don't have to do it after every game, because not every game is going to have, like, egregious calls. Like, there may be a borderline call here or there, but you don't need to go into the nitty-gritty details of those. But if you go, like, once a week or once every 2 weeks of you pick out 2, 3, 4 borderline calls that were questioned by the media, and you talk with the ref that made the call, and then you talk with another official that can put their spin on it, and you can explain the thought process and educate your fan base, so that when the next time something similar comes up, we kind of have an idea of what could happen.
Yeah, I think the problem is that just get, and I would love to see them be able a little braver with that.
Well, I also would like to see Sportsnet do this too, or hockey, but all of the hockey broadcasts. But I'd like to see them do what the NFL did and bring in a rules analyst, bring in a referee that can explain. Okay, I'm not sure what they're thinking there, but this is what I see.
They would probably say we already have Ron McLean for that. You should be seeing my face right now.
I love Ron McLean, but you know
where I stand on Ron McLean, Kev.
I'm not sure I do.
He needs to tone down the opinions, but yeah, he does offer sometimes, in all seriousness, some decent insight into what the referees may be thinking or how they would have seen things. But yeah, you're talking about an in the booth, tap the guy in the middle of the play type thing. That would be interesting, perhaps.
TSN had Kerry Fraser on air for a couple seasons, and that was really informative. And if anyone isn't following him on Twitter, you should be, because he's been a fantastic information source over these playoffs with explaining different calls. Any way you can educate your fan base on what a call, what is or is not a penalty, what is or is not a goal, the better, because then you're not going to be facing the music for these egregious calls as much, because they know that you're trying to educate them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the level-headed people on Twitter will be able to explain to the strong-headed opinion people on Twitter what's going on. So I think it just creates a better conversation.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be idiots on Twitter that argue
absolutely.
That you can't cater to them.
No, but I feel like the CFL has done a better job. Like, this is terrible to say, but the CFL is doing a better job communicating officiating calls than the NHL. And if that's happening, because I'm like the CFL is great, but like the NHL is a major sports league where the CFL is a Canadian football league, and that shouldn't be happening, right? So, like they're falling behind is my point. So, anyway, yeah, we will probably be celebrating here if St. Louis wins tonight. Who knows? But
yeah, I think we're all in agreement. We're pulling for St. Louis here, or
yeah,
definitely.
Do you guys all have St. Louis winning tonight?
I'm less certain of that.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to Game 7.
Yeah, realistically.
I just hope they can pull it off, because that that celebration with those fans, with Gloria playing, would be just like epic.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they find just that little bit extra and find a way to eke it out. I don't think it's going to be much separating either team tonight. I think Boston's going to be coming hard, and then you're going to have the St. Louis feeding off what is going to be an absolutely deafening crowd.
Oh,
So,
yeah. This will be great. I think this is going to be fantastic theater. And I think, you know what, I know we're taking too much time here, but I don't think we've talked enough about what a historic run this has been for St. Louis. January, the beginning of they played. Remember when they played Vancouver in December? That team was atrocious. That team was terrible.
We were walking. It was just like a walk in the park, and for Vancouver to beat you like that should be embarrassing. And yeah, I think it's a great story.
Yeah, like just how they've come. I don't think that team has been that low that late in a comeback to win the Stanley Cup. Like, this is a historic comeback in my mind. Someone with more research skills than I have will probably point that out. But this is, to me, this has got to be one of the most historic runs I can remember.
Yeah, you've got a team that dead last in the league in January. They fire their coach, they bring up a rookie goaltender, and go on a run all the way to being within a win of the Stanley Cup, of winning the Stanley Cup. That's a better story, arguably a better story than Vegas last year.
Yeah, I think, it will be a better story if they win.
Yep. And then Bennington can have his trophy and then leave the Calder for Petey.
There you go.
No, Petey's good.
I just don't discount Ryan O'Reilly in the Conn Smythe conversation. I mean, for me, it's either him or Bennington if St. Louis can pull this off.
If Ryan O'Reilly's huge.
Oh, if Boston wins and Marchand wins the Conn Smythe.
Oh no!
No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, one thing I will say is watching Ryan O'Reilly play in these playoffs is basically a nice preview for Canucks fans on what Bo Horvat will look like.
Well, I mean, face-off wise, Ryan O'Reilly's been Mr. Automatic pretty much.
Yeah. They both play a very strong and smart game, and they both are good. Are the go-to face-off guy, I keep watching that and just keep thinking this is what it's going to look like when Bo Horvat's on his game and into the playoffs. So hopefully the Canucks can get back there in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up there. Anna, tell us a little bit about what the C4 podcast has coming up. What is the plan for the draft? All free agency. What are you guys going to be doing?
Well, this is our first summer going through the summer, so we'll be every 2 weeks around the summer, which is exciting for us. The draft, we just watch this space, I would say, follow the C4 podcast, and we will get our final plans out very shortly. But yeah, we're very excited to actually be able to cover the draft and free agency in such close quarters for once. So yeah.
All right, and that's at give us the website, Twitter, etc.
We're at the C4 Podcast on Twitter. You can also join our Discord channel from there. It's our pinned tweet. And get us on iTunes, on Spotify, on Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. D4 for Canucks Hockey Vlog is our name. So yeah, give us a listen.
For us, Tyler and I are actually going to the draft. We will be there. So we'll be hearing Gary Bettman's trades to announce right there.
Yes. We'll get to let him know how we feel about those moves as well.
Yeah,
you're gonna want to hear this.
I can't wait.
But we will be. We've got some things in the cooker. We are actually in the midst just from my perspective, and the hockey part of this is like agree or disagree. The podcast is more the attention was at more current events, not necessarily sports scene. So we're moving. The hockey podcast is going to have its own podcast, iTunes. You're going to be able to subscribe to that specifically, have its own website. We're working on some other things as well. So that's will be one of the goals in the summer is to get that up. We are also, our plan is also we're going to be going every 2 weeks after the mayhem of the off season, the fire of it. We'll be going every 2 weeks. We are planning to have Tori Peterson on to talk Flames at some point. We'll be talking to a bunch of other people as well. Is there anything specific that we have other than Tori that we have coming up, or
nothing yet? I don't think.
Okay, all right. And again, where can we follow you guys, Sean, Tyler?
I am Bearded Canuck 03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
And of course, I'm at KEVOLE. And Anna, it was great to have you on. We loved the conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And we're going to leave with a little bit of Gloria as we head out. Thanks for listening. Well, bye for now.